Hi, welcome to SUSECON 2022. This is session TUT 1133, Apply Security to Your Servers with AppArmor. In today's session, we will take a look at an AppArmor introduction. We'll talk about what AppArmor is, what it does. Then we'll look at how do we configure and how do we manage AppArmor. I'll give you some information about the demo for AppArmor. The demos this year are in separate sessions, but I'll give you a session number for that demo so that you can go in and check that out. And then some final thoughts on AppArmor and just security in general at SUSE. So this is me, Brian Six. I'm a sales engineer with SUSE, and I live in SoCal. So if you're ever in the neighborhood, hit me up, go for a beer, maybe go play some golf. So let's look at AppArmor from an introductory perspective. What it is, what does it do? So AppArmor is considered a Linux security module because that's where it plugs in from a stack perspective. So it is at the kernel level, so we get the efficiency of running at the kernel. We also get the capabilities of running at the kernel. It's a command line driven application or security tool, I should say. So it's easy for scripting, for adding to other automation tools. And it is also a mandatory access control security system as opposed to a discretionary access control system. So discretionary access controls look at things and are respective of things like, who are you? What privileges do you have in terms of what your credentials are? What do you have access to? Directories? What can you do? What can you not do? What do you have access to? That kind of thing. Because we are a mandatory access control, we are at a lower level and we can make restrictions irrespective of whoever the user is that maybe an application's impersonating as to be able to run its operations. So even if you've got an application that's been exploited and the hacker has figured out how to gain root access to the system as that application, they will not be able to exploit and perform operations that AppArmor doesn't allow, even if they're the root user. And it's dynamic for existing profiles. And by that, I mean when a server boots, when AppArmor first loads, it reads all the profiles on the system and activates them. But if you've already booted your server and it's been running for a while and you want to add a brand new application profile, you can do so, but you need to do some restarting, and we'll talk about that later, restarting of services or use a different utility to activate that profile. For existing profiles, changes can be made dynamically and made available without restarting. And when I say restarting, I don't mean restart the server, but restarting the service or the like. So from an architecture perspective, here's where AppArmor plugs in. Again, we plug in as a Linux security module, and the AppArmor application leverages profiles, and these application profiles contain aspects of the application and OS components that are leveraged in the application. So the profile is telling AppArmor a little bit about what the application does and how it interfaces. And then we have our modules, our tools that we have to interface with AppArmor. And then logging and alerting are also available with AppArmor for troubleshooting and tracking purposes. So what does AppArmor really do? So we know that it's a Linux security module, but how do we leverage AppArmor? What does it do? So first, AppArmor uses a wizard-based approach to track an application's activities and then generate a profile to match those activities. So AppArmor can learn about what an application does, store that in a profile. So it's application profile capabilities as code, if you will. It's tracking what an application does on a normal basis. And it can restrict access, notice, to files and paths, also network functions and system functions. So we're able to tap in on almost every level of the OS and the operating system and running at the Linux kernel level. And there are several modes of operation that AppArmor operates within. One is called enforce mode. So once I profile an application, I can then say enforce that profile so that I get real-time, zero trust environment for an application. I can also run my AppArmor in complain mode, where I'm not enforcing anything. I'm just logging and recording all the things that the application is doing. And particularly those things that are outside of the profile that was captured. So if I've profiled an application, I've activated the profile, put it into enforce mode, and now all of a sudden my application doesn't work properly, I can put it into complain mode and maybe learn why. And then there's the learn mode, which is what I initially use to profile the application. So those are the three modes that any profile can be in. So how do I configure it? How do I get it to do all these things that AppArmor is supposed to be able to do? So the first thing is we need to make sure that AppArmor is installed. Now on the SUSE Linux operating systems, AppArmor is installed on every different, on, I should say, most of the installations of SUSE Linux. If AppArmor is not in, well, even in the ones that are installed, it's a portion of what's available. It's not everything, because we don't know that you want to use AppArmor necessarily. So not everything gets made available, but the service is there and a couple other things. But we have made available for the SUSE Linux operating system a pattern called AppArmor. So if you do a zipper in -t pattern AppArmor, you will get all the utilities, the things listed here below, as well as predefined profiles, libraries that are needed for certain functions within AppArmor. So all of that comes down with the pattern. So it's a one-stop shop, get everything with one installation. Now, here are the utilities that help you interact with, configure, and manage AppArmor. You won't really use, well, you might use a lot of them. Let me just talk about the ones that are the most important ones, the ones that are most frequently used. One is the AA status command. Now that command runs and lists all of the active profiles in relation to, well, it lists all the active profiles, and it tells you of all the profiles loaded, which ones are in which mode. Are they in learn mode? Are they in enforce mode? And are there any processes that are loaded that that profile applies to? So I can load a profile for anything. I can load it for an Apache database. I can load it for some application out there. I can load 1,000 profiles, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm running the application or the process that that profile is associated with. I can just load those profiles, and if those applications show up, then I'm ready to enforce what privileges are available for them. So the AA status command gives me a little heads up on how things look right now. The AA genprof is the utility that I use to generate the profiles for my application. So I'm doing this in a custom way. And I say that because there are a lot of profiles already created and stored up in the cloud. You can just go download them and copy them into a directory, and they will be ready for AppArmor. But if you want to do your own custom building of a profile, then the AA genprof tool is a way to start that. The AA logprof is a way to update a profile. Now, by generating a profile in the first place with the genprof utility, you will be asked when the utility runs to select the application that you're trying to profile. And then it says, oh, okay, now that we've gotten this far, open up another window and go execute your application, or go run your application if it's browser-based or what have you. But go execute all of the features and functions of the application that you want the AppArmor profile wizard to learn about. And then when you're done, you come back to this utility that's sitting there waiting, and tell it, okay, now let's go in and look for all the changes and let's go build that profile. And it walks you through step by step all the activities that server or that application performed, and ask you which ones you want to add to the profile, or there's some that you want to not add. And so you can customize it that way. And then it builds the profile and saves it. And now that profile is ready for AppArmor to enforce if you choose on your server. The log prof is a way to say, oh, well, I ran my application through the wizard, captured it, made my profile, put it into enforce mode, and now I've got a few users complaining that there are some things that they used to be able to do that they can't do any longer. And it's probably because those functions were left out during the original wizard. The process that I used with the wizard to go build my profile. So this utility helps me go back, re-examine the application, learn about some of these new features, and then augment that profile and add pieces to it. I've got the AA complain utility, which lets me take a profile, put it into complain mode so that it's not enforced any longer, but at least logs the activities and things that are going on so that I can see kind of what's going on with that particular application. Let's say I do an upgrade to an application and now there are some functions that don't work because they're new and I didn't profile them the first time around, but I don't know that yet because I don't know what's new, what's not new. The AA complaint mode is a good helper in troubleshooting those kinds of activities on your system. And then the AA enforce, easy enough to understand, takes the profile, puts it into enforce mode. So that is real-time protection against any kind of anomalies with that particular application. So if you'd like to see a demo, there will be a demo 1335 available, which we will showcase AppArmor, very simple utility, how it can operate successfully on one hand, and if it's hacked, how that can be blocked with AppArmor. So go check out that demo when you get a chance. So some final thoughts on AppArmor. Here's an example profile. You can see this in full. I believe I got this from an OpenSUSE documentation website. It's probably got one of the best ones that lists the profile. The beautiful thing about that particular one, and I thought I'd put the URL link in here, but it has numbers and circles for all of these entries. And there's more in there. I just couldn't get it all on this one page. But it has numbers and a reference that lists that number and what that particular item in the profile is doing. So it walks you through each one of these. What does it do? And it's pretty, easy to understand. You've got these include statements. If you've ever done any kind of programming, you know that there's ways. Include statements typically leverage libraries of other written functions that you can bring in and make available. So we've got the ability to do includes. We've got comments section. Got to be able to comment and document your profile. Here I can see that there's some capabilities and network functions that I'm controlling access to or allowing access to. And then I've got links to files that are generated, and I've got paths with specific pathing like /bin/mount or /temp/foo PID. But then I've got other wildcard references, Etsy foo star, lib ld star.so star, lots of ways of referencing, for example, paths and files. And then the rights are listed right beside them. So this is very easy to read. It doesn't require a lot of skill in terms of programming a language kind of thing. It's a very simple, easy to read definition of how this particular application looks, feels, and operates. And here's an example of some of the permissions. Easy, again, they make R for read, W for write, K for lock. A for append, L for link, or very, very simple, um, permission structure that's easily read, as you can see here, from a path perspective or a file perspective, determining what it is you want to do. And these are modifiable. So if you would like something that was flagged as read only and you wanted it to be read write, then you can add the W to it and give it that capability and simply save it, reload that profile, and off you go. So where are profiles stored? It's a great question. By default, they're stored in and at least on the SUSE Linux Enterprise server. Not every operating system has to respect this, but most of them do. /etc/AppArmor-D is where all the default profiles are listed. That's where we will look to when we start a server. We will look to this directory for profiles to load automatically. So when a server starts, when AppArmor first initializes, it reads that directory and loads every profile that's in it. If I were to do a systemctl restart on AppArmor as a service, it will again reread that and load everything up. If I want to just load a single profile by itself, I can use the AppArmor parser with the -ALR and then the path to the profile. Very easy way to load just a single one at a time. If I want to unload a single profile, again, AppArmor parser with a capital R, again, and then the path to it. So very simple. And if I want to just unload all the profiles that are available, run the AA teardown command and do whatever it is you're trying to do in the first place. One thing that most people don't know is that our favorite command, the PS command, knows about AppArmor. So if you run PS with your favorite parameters, AUX, this, that, the other thing, if you add a capital Z, and this is important, the capital Z at the end, then it will not only list you what you would normally see based on the parameters that you added, but it will also list you on the far left-hand side the status from an AppArmor perspective. Is it running in an unconfined mode? Is it running in enforced mode? Is it running in complaint mode? Are any of the existing running processes protected, with AppArmor? So AppArmor will show you that. So AA status lists you all the profiles and then gives you some statistics. And if you go to the demo, you'll see this, and I'll show you that in the demo. Gives you some things like how many profiles are loaded, how many processes have a profile that's enabled for it, how many processes are running without a profile. That kind, you'll get some of those kinds of reporting. But this will list you all the profiles. All of the processes and which ones have a profile and are they enforced or not enforced. Unconfined is the term that AppArmor uses for unenforced. Now, from a security perspective, SUSE has got a couple things that we're bringing to the table. One, we talked about AppArmor. SUSE actually ships with both AppArmor and SE Linux. SE Linux is an alternative, another methodology for doing, system hardening like this. Each has its own strength. There are some added capabilities on the SE Linux side, but requires a much more skilled individual to do the profiles. Do not look near the same. It's almost like a language of its own. So there is some skill required to be able to manage those profiles. But, it's an option, and we ship with both because we want people to have access to either, and you pick the one that works best for you. Both can be used to harden or secure your host. But we also bring NewVector to the table. Now, NewVector is a separate package. It's a separate acquisition that we made, so we own NewVector now. But NewVector is a container workload security tool, and I bring it up in here because it has there's two sides of the coin for NewVector. There's a scanning mode, which Scanning modes are great, doing CIS benchmark scanning and that kind of thing against a Kubernetes cluster, which is what we're talking about here, container workloads in a Kubernetes cluster, although it doesn't have to necessarily be Kubernetes. Container workloads is really the more appropriate way, but Kubernetes happens to be the elephant in the room as far as containers go these days. But NuVector will do two things. It has a scanning side of it, so sort of like antivirus scanning or something, but it's typically scanning things that, well, if you've already been infected, let's say if it was a virus, which is not what we're doing particularly, but if you were scanning for something, a configuration that's already been made that's inappropriate, it's sort of after the fact. It's reactive to things. It's finding something that already exists and alerting you to it. And that's great. But it also has the other side of the coin, which is real-time, what they call zero trust protection. And it is very much like what AppArmor does. And you'll notice it has three modes. It has the learn mode, like we do. It has a monitor mode, which is like our complain mode. And then it has the protect, which is like our enforce mode. The nice thing about NuVector is that it's got a great, beautiful GUI, not only for the initial configuration of a profile for a container workload, but for remediation. If you've got it running in monitor mode and you see what it's doing and you don't know why it's doing something, you can click on it. It's got deep packet inspection with heuristics built in. It's got some awesome things that it can do from that perspective. So on the one side, we've got AppArmor or SE Linux for doing host management and security control, and then NuVector if you're running container workloads. And I've listed here the hands-on lab, HOL 1319, great session on the installation and setup of NuVector, as well as the TUT 1067, a call out for that, for just an introduction to it, walk through some of the details, but there's some similarity in that real-time protect mode and how it gets enforced, just like the way we do in AppArmor. But again, great interface. Highly recommend checking out that session. Anyway, go check out those sessions. Go check out my demo, 1335. Appreciate you guys checking this out. Thanks for coming to SUSECON, and hopefully we'll see you live at SUSECON next year.